Alright guys, so I'm going to be doing a review from another book from the Indie Hall my friend Chris sent me, and that is Arcade Kings. This is an Image comic written and drawn by Dylan Burnett. This book is going to be pretty fun to talk about. I'm going to say right out the gate that this is a definite buy. Like this comic is a definite get, and I'll explain a bit of it as to why. I think I rhymed there for a second. So the story takes place on a place called in an island called Infinite City, and this fighter named Vince McMax. I can't imagine what name that's supposed to be a reference to, and what person from a certain company is referencing. Who can say? And his two adopted sons, Joe and Ken. Vince, like Vic McMax. Vic basically retired early for some unknown reason, and we fast forward that his two adopted sons are estranged from each other. Joe and Ken, who are orphans that Vic took in for unknown purposes. Joe has now evolved to have like a grapefruit dragon fruit kind of like head. That's Joe, and right there, the kid with the blue hair is Ken. They basically have not seen each other, and Joe has become a street fighter of sorts, protecting the multiple arcades in order to just have a place to crash. Whereas Ken now owns a small business, a small arcade corner, and is trying to keep his estranged evil father away from owning every arcade here. The comic and eventually coincides into a bonkers, full-on finale. If you haven't guessed already from the cover alone, yeah, this book really does take a lot of inspiration from this feels like OKKO. If that's the best way the closest thing I can compare it to is OKKO. And that's a great animated show. That's not a knock. The artwork is very bright and vibrant, very much like Scott Pilgrim, Scott Pilgrim kind of deal. I want to find it because a lot of pages are really good. Like a lot of these pages, that's perfect. Like just the bright vibrancy, very kinetic kind of energy in these fight sequences, and a lot of them do have that kind of video game reference to it. A lot of them are video game reference. This takes elements of like OKKO, Scott Pilgrim, and even some Tekken in there. Tekken and Street Fighter, and puts them all into like one big blender and hits that blender button on puree. It's a pretty while it does look like it's hiding some kind of sinister undertone, because I know some people get indie books like, oh, this cover is so cute, but then it turns out to be an uber dark book. There's not really much darkness to it. It actually, you could give this to your kid. If you got kids, I would say it does have a few swears here and there, but that's really it. This feels like it could easily pass as its own book. Like it really could pass as its own book. When I say passes its own book, you can give to a younger reader. That's what I meant to say. The book is it does feel a little generic at points, but on a whole, it knows its tropes. Like it knows what it wants to be, and continues on its own merry way, and we don't judge it for that. Sometimes comics can just be generic, and that's fine. And this one really shows its references on its sleeve. The supporting characters are kind of forgotten. That's one of the few drawbacks I have, is that they introduce, for 5 issues, I will say, for a 5-issue miniseries, this was actually very well paced. But the one thing is, they introduce all these other characters, and I'm sure there's an Arcade Kings sequel somewhere, if that's already out or not. But they introduce all these side characters, and then they just kind of forget about them. Like, there's someone that Joe, in the first issue, Joe has bunked with some guy he saved, and then he just time to mosey on. And then you have another character in here named Plum, and she's kind of treated as Joe's rival for a hot second, and then they forget about her for a bit. And then it's kind of implied Ken has this girl named M who's attracted to him. Forget about her. So that's my one thing, is that they throw in, and I'm sure again, if there's an Arcade, I don't know if that's if that's out already or planning to be out, but it really does feel like these other characters will probably play, and it does leave off for sequel bait. It does leave off for some sequel bait here and there. But it does hold its own as its own book, other than the minor thing I just talked about. All in all, this is a fun book. This is a fun, like, if you love, like I said, Tekken, OKKO, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, I would say give this a look. Like, I would definitely say you need to check this book out post-haste. It's a fun, kinetic, it feels like the other thing is the fight sequences are great. It feels perfectly paced. Yeah, I highly recommend Arcade Kings. I highly recommend it. It's definitely worth your time. So there you go, guys. That is pretty much my review for Arcade Kings. If you've read it, let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of it. Chris, thank you once again, brother, for this book, as well as the others. I know he said, like, the next haul will be coming this week as of this recording, or the next, I can't remember. But yeah, so be prepared for the second indie haul and unboxing of that. But anyway, once again, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.